And to have that come across in a job interview, I think would definitely set you apart.
Welcome to the show, my friend Yollanda. Just imagine some sirens and things going off.
And my
So
dance music.
there we go. Let's just go with that. So Yolanda, I'm super excited to have you on the show today because, as we will find out, you are a multi-passionate entrepreneur with lots of things going on, lots of pies that you've got your fingers in. So can you kind of give us that highlight reel of the different types of businesses that you have in your world right now?
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki. I'm so excited to be here. And I guess for my highlight reel, I have the next hour to share. So I am doing a few different things. 8 years ago, I launched a Mandarin school called Panda Mandarin, which I now run it with my husband, Brian. And 5 years ago, I launched a nonprofit called Girls Strong, which is focused on empowering young girls in Toronto and the world, because we have really grown, into the world since the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, I launched a third business because I figured I'm not busy enough. So I started to coach women to launch their businesses, but also I do corporate training on authentic communications, which is a workshop that I created. So that's kind of rounds out my days.
I love this because those are such varied types of businesses. You know, when you think about Panda Mandarin, it's teaching children and, people to speak
Mm,
Mandarin. So there's like a classroom teaching component, with the nonprofit being all about girls empowerment and how are you doing that. And then with coaching, speaking, corporate trainings, it's such a variety of things happening. So can you dive a little bit deeper? Let's start with Panda Mandarin. So what types of things happen on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis so that Panda Mandarin can actually operate?
yeah. I feel like this is a test. My husband should be watching this to see like if I actually know what's going on
We're going
now.
to send this to Brian. We'll see what he
Yeah,
says.
it's a test. So day to day, we run classes. So we have our own commercial location, which is near Yonge and Lawrence, where we run classes. But we also partner with schools, so private schools, public schools, and we run classes there, usually after school and on weekends. So what it looks like sort of on the day to day is we have teachers come into our locations and they set up their classes and they teach little kids. So there's a lot of really awesome like noises that happen, kids laughing, they're playing
Mhm.
games, or they're singing. So that's kind of what you see. And behind the scenes, there's a lot happening. So our team of staff would be planning curriculum, making sure that all of our PowerPoint is consistent. And then of course we have our office admin who coordinates all the schedules with the parents, who registers. And
Mhm.
so there's definitely a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes as well with Panda Mandarin.
Yeah, I feel like anything that involves teaching and then teaching children often has a lot of administrative load, a lot of
Mm,
communication, a lot of follow up, a lot of making sure that people are in the right building at the right time with the right homework, for instance. So how many students does Panda Mandarin serve? Is this another test from Brian? He
I
knows.
know. I was like, let me log into our no. Before the pandemic, I think we were up to about 300 students,
Hmm.
and and the pandemic really decimated like
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
And so we were running virtual classes throughout the pandemic, and then
Hmm.
we started running camps again. So I
Hmm.
think we might now be back to closer to 200,
Hmm.
but we are not back to
It's
our
still growing,
pre-pandemic. Yeah, we're still growing. We're
still
still,
coming back.
yeah, coming back. And it's interesting you mentioned about the client facing versus behind the scenes work, because
Hmm.
right now my work with Panda Mandarin is really only about a day a week,
Hmm.
and my work is mostly focused on training the teachers and working
Mm.
with our head teacher to make sure that our curriculum is up to date, but mostly really training the teachers. And that takes like a day a week
Yeah.
to do. And so I'm not even involved in the day-to-day
Hmm.
operations at all anymore.
Yeah. You've got
Yeah,
good support for that. Okay, so I love that. Let's flip now into the nonprofit because this is a
sure.
sector that admittedly I'm not even very familiar with how nonprofits work. I know they are a very different beast from for-profit businesses. So can you give us a little insight into how does a nonprofit like Girl Strong run? What happens? What does it
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Um, so from the outside, it doesn't look that different than a for-profit company.
Hmm.
It's really behind the scenes with a nonprofit that operates differently or that would appear different. So Girl Strong, we run classes just like Panda Mandarin. Actually, Girl Strong used to be under the Panda Mandarin umbrella of classes.
Oh, I didn't know
And then,
that.
yeah, yeah, like, and then we actually had to essentially donate all the IP of Girl Strong from Panda Mandarin to Girl Strong nonprofit.
Mhm.
So behind the scenes, there were a lot of um, I was gonna say challenges, but they're like things that I learned. Like I learned so much about the nonprofit world through this process. And so that's actually how Girl Strong became its own standalone corporation as a
Mhm.
nonprofit. And when you operate a nonprofit, you also need a board of directors, and
Mm.
where you are constantly connecting to the board. You have meetings, you have to make sure that you're governing everything,
Mhm.
like everything is up to snuff. Like,
Mhm.
and no one related to you can be on this board. So it has to
Mhm.
be people at arm's length in the community who have a vested interest in making sure that Girl Strong is doing what it's supposed to be doing and serving the community that we serve. Because my original motivation for creating Girl Strong comes from my grandmother's passing, and
Mhm.
she really valued education and she didn't have those opportunities as a young girl. I just really wanted to give those opportunities to girls in vulnerable communities, underserved communities in the city that may not otherwise have a chance to
Mhm.
participate in this kind of program. And so that's why the nonprofit model made a lot of sense, because
Mhm.
we can then access certain funds, grants,
Mhm.
donations as well.
Mhm. So that's really interesting. When we think about a nonprofit, a lot of times what comes to people's mind is things like bureaucracy, not having a lot of money. Making decisions on spending can be challenging because there's the board and the fact that you're not a for-profit. So when it comes to Girl Strong and thinking about we'd like to bring support in or we would like to get some help at Girl Strong, how does that decision making process happen within a nonprofit?
Yeah. So every nonprofit is set up differently. And of course, every board is different. So I can really only speak to my experience with my own board, but I've also sat on a charity board
Mhm.
myself. So I have seen sort of from both perspectives,
Yeah.
working with the board and working on the board.
Mhm.
And I don't think that there's as much bureaucracy as maybe people think. I
Mhm.
mean, it does have more needs of paperwork and reporting. Yeah, that definitely happens. You have to have quarterly meetings and you need to submit like reports, and
Mhm.
but I think choosing your board carefully is very important as well,
Mhm.
and making sure that everyone is on the same page. Um, and that's really my job at the beginning
Mhm.
as the executive director. I really needed to rally people
Mhm.
around, and making sure that the communication is clear about what their role is. So that I think that in itself just could cut the bureaucracy down
Mhm.
a lot. And in terms of who we interact with, we tend to interact mostly with nonprofits and charities as well
Mhm.
for partnerships. So I can see there might exist some issues because
Mhm.
they also have to deal with their individual boards.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of a bit like a loop, right? That
Mhm.
that could happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that as soon as you have a nonprofit, you are now in like knee deep in bureaucracy. I don't think that's true.
Well, that's always good to know. So,
Yeah,
you mentioned before we started recording that you are in fact hiring at Panda Mandarin. So
yeah.
when you kind of think about, deciding who to hire, who to have a conversation with, both with Panda Mandarin and Girl Strong, those have, I would say, niche skill sets. Panda Mandarin, if you're a teacher, obviously you have to have teaching experience and speak Mandarin. Girl
Yeah.
Strong, having nonprofit experience specifically, is going to be a big kind of bonus versus someone who just has maybe generalized experience. So when you kind of go think through this process of we are hiring, what do you think is the most important factor for you to decide I want to have a conversation with that applicant or that person who's indicated an interest in maybe working for us?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. And for both, really, the most important thing is that they fit into the culture that we have already established, and which is a culture of compassion, kindness, support, and no bureaucracy, and you know, like zero um basically the communication issues that I train corporate teams on is what I look for to not have to deal with my own organizations. And so the most important thing it's really their fit, like their personality fit. Because for example, Panda Mandarin, we're looking for a full-time admin assistant. And there are a lot of people that could qualify, but it really takes somebody who um, has that customer experience in mind whenever they're communicating with, and customers for them, for our admin assistant, is not just the parents, although the
Mhm.
parents are the customers because they're the ones paying,
Mm.
but the children are really important too. They're the consumers and
Mhm.
our team of teachers. So it really has to be somebody who values that kind of experience and support.
Mhm.
Um, and it's the same goes for Girl Strong because our admin would need to work with not only me, but with the board members as well as our partners, who are also leaders in different charities and nonprofits. And they might also work with donors. And so
Mhm.
they need to wear many different hats and they need to be able to be okay with that.
Mhm. I think that's really interesting because I've seen a lot of job applications. I've worked with many people to help hire,
Mm,
support for them, hire different team members. So, I have a certain way of how I go through job applications. And like you, I'm looking for culture, personality traits before I look at job history, for example.
yeah.
So, when you're kind of looking for that culture fit, that personality fit, what do you think is the most effective thing for you to see in order to learn that about someone? Is it them telling a story? Is it them sharing an anecdote? How can they make their personality say stand out in an application?
Yeah. So I think a couple of years ago, moved away from um like question based, like whatever, like just
Mhm.
text based questions. So we always have them do a 1 minute video,
Mhm.
and in the video it's usually a scenario of some sort, and just to ask them like, we started with some really easy ones like, why do you want to teach Mandarin, or why
Mhm.
is girl empowerment important? um and we got some good answers from that. And often you watch a video, you can tell fairly quickly whether this person is a good fit. But then
Mm-hmm.
now we're starting to ask more sort of scenario-based questions right off the bat with the video. Usually those we kind of save for the actual interviews, but
Mm-hmm.
now we're throwing them into the mix with just the recruitment. Like, it's great that there are all these tools now you can use where you can upload their
Mm-hmm.
videos.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend I know what tools. So, but
Someone does. Brian's got it.
he's got the first level. Like he's the one that brings me the client, the
Mm-hmm.
candidates that I need to meet with. But yeah, so that's what he's using. And I think it's really great. And it cuts
Mm-hmm.
down on a lot of our time of
Mm-hmm.
interviewing candidates that are just not good fit. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to waste their time either. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a win-win to have these kind of sorted out ahead of time.
Love that. And I know it definitely helps because I think if someone's personality can really shine through a video or through written communication or whatever has, that's automatically going to just be more interesting for me to consume than reading a resume or a list of tasks someone can do. Because
Yeah.
I can train you how to do all that if you don't already know our way of doing it. What I cannot train is, people always say you can't train for culture fit. You have to
No.
hire for culture and
Yeah.
personality first. So,
Yeah.
to kind of leave our audience with Yollanda's last piece of advice, thinking about virtual assistants, online business managers, and other digital support workers that work with organizations and businesses like yours, what is the single, most important piece of advice you would want to leave them with if they are looking to work with clients like you?
Mm. So I have worked with virtual assistants in the past as well. And so I think what I would offer as advice is clarity. I just find that when you are not working in person, it's even more important to
Mm,
communicate, over communicate, and to have that come across in a job interview, I think would definitely set you apart because it shows understanding of your client's experience. And thinking back about like VAs that worked well and VAs that didn't, I really think clarity had a lot to do with that.
hmm And that I agree with you so much in that clarity of communication, clarity of what you're good at, what you can do, that automatically goes towards building trust. And when
Yeah,
trust exists, the sooner it can do that, the better results everybody involved is going to have. It's a better
definitely.
workplace.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right, Yolanda, thank you so, so much. Always appreciate you. Always love hearing your advice because you're so good at it.
You're so welcome. It's really nice to see you too. Thank you. And you give the best advice. I mean, you're my coach, so yeah.
Winning.
I know.